Yeah, we'll just have a bit of banter on it.
You're live. What's up, mate?
Well, it's fantastic to be here at the factory. I brought a copy of the English Hairdressers Journal that our little collaboration is in there. Our Neo Mod collection, very British inspired. I think we're going to share a feeling of this haircut here.
Yep.
And I think we'll put our own spin on it. But
For sure.
It's nice to be cutting it in the sun and not in the rain in London. But
cool.
Great to be here.
Yeah, it's good to have you here. Let's do this. I'm going to pass you off to Erin.
Alright, so welcome everybody. My good friend Mark Willis here from England, Electric Hair. I'm DJ, Erin's holding the camera. If you've got questions, please feel free. What we'd like to do is kind of something along these lines. Back in March, we went to England and we did a collection, a shoot with Mark, and got these in. But I think what we're going to do is something along like this kind of vibe. So I'm going to put like the bob shape in, and then Mark's going to come through and just start that fringe in. So get started.
I feel like a snooker player here, waiting to take my shot. Like, this is a true collaboration.
So what we've done is going to work symmetrically because we're going to put a fringe in there. So that's really going to take up this portion through here. A fringe is English for bangs, just in case you don't know. So what I've done is I've sectioned right behind the ear, right where the head just starts to turn into the sides where it curves around. So kind of standard 4 sections. And what I'm going to do is, a lot of times when you do these kind of like micro graduated bobs or whatever you want to call them, we start in the back. And I find that makes life a little bit more difficult. It's possible to do, but generally when you're talking about a bob length or anything like that, it's always referenced up front. It's never really like, oh, I wanted this length back here. You're really always kind of putting it through here. So we have to like start this haircut in the back to kind of try and reach this length that we've discussed with the client in the consultation. And generally what happens is it's a bunch of like, you're working away back here for quite a while, maybe 5 to 10 minutes, and then you turn the corner and start to move into the sides, and that's when you really see the length, and so does your client. And generally, from experience, 9 times out of 10, it's a mutual disappointment, feeling of disappointment when you turn that corner. So instead of starting in the back, I'm going to start in the front. I'm going to choose to use horizontal sectioning because I want to create a kind of a heavier graduation. There's a difference between using horizontal sections and vertical sections in any haircut, but in graduation what it does for me is it creates a much more swollen, heavier, rounder build-up of weight. If I was to cut it vertically, I would be physically cutting the vertical dimension, so I would be cutting that graduation, and therefore it would make it much flatter and kind of try and take it leaner that way. Whereas if I work it horizontally, I use elevation. So I pull the head down away from the head shape, and that allows it to get heavier but rounder as it builds. So that's what I'm going to do to start this off. If you guys have any questions, please feel free. Both Mark and I can answer them for you. So starting here in the sideburn area.
Can you talk about, how you sort of choose a length that's suitable for someone, like what you look for on someone's features?
Well, we all share like a common symmetry, bone structure, the human race. So I look at those particular things, and for me, that's looking at the jawline, the cheekbones, the bridge of the nose, all those kinds of things, the chin or chins. Again, it's reality. You've got to be aware of what's going on here so that you either complement it or you hide it, so you don't focus on those things. When we look at this mannequin, it's got quite an interesting bone structure, and it's quite similar to our bone structure. So we've definitely got the cheekbones and the jawline here. And to me, this haircut's going to be more like kind of a jawline, cheekbone kind of situation. It's really going to accentuate that because I'm going to kind of bring up the length through here, and I'm not going to make it so triangular, so heavy towards the front, really taking that corner off. So it kind of leans towards round graduation, but I would say round-ish.
Cool.
Cool, you ready?
Yep.
So my first section is just a horizontal section through the front there. And really what I'm going to do is I'm going to establish the length. So I'm allowing the hair to kind of do what it wants to do, because if you notice, this texture, it's got a little bit more of a wave to it. So I'm going to allow it to do that by just tapping above the ear quite generously, and that releases any excess tension where that hair is being pulled around the ear or over it. And I'm just going to put in that kind of a length. And now that I've done that, I'll actually go in there and look at it in the hands. So I'll actually take that section now and I'll elevate that section straight off the head, keeping it quite low. So I'm not pulling it straight out the head, I'm pulling it quite low. I don't know the exact degree. I'm not really a hair cutter that's ever going to say 45 degrees, because that is one point of many points to graduate the hair. Plus, I'm not naive, I have no idea where that is. I don't have a protractor with me, so. If I pull it down, it gets heavier towards the top. I always say this, pull away from what you want to keep. So right now, I want it to get heavier towards the top. So I want to leave, I want to keep some weight up here. So I'm going to have to pull the hair away from that. It's just like when you over-direct hair backwards, it's going to get heavier towards the front, right? So I'm essentially over-directing the hair down, or I'm elevating the hair down, and that's going to make it get heavier. So I'm going to use a stationary guideline, so that's a stationary elevation for the side area. I'm going to keep it quite low onto that first section. So really that's going to just kind of bevel the edge. So if you can see my first section being brought below 90 degrees, and then I'm bringing this down onto that. So that's how I'm making this heavier than this. So then you're going to start to see that bevel. So it's going to sit right onto that jawline, and then as I'm building this weight in this graduation, that's going to sit right on that cheekbone. So it really falls into that kind of coffee shop or cafe bob, kind of like Natalie Portman in what's it called, The Professional, right? Yeah.
Leon the Professional.
Leon the Professional. Which originally was called La Femme Nikita, right? Yeah. So again, pulling down stationary guideline. Anytime you've got a stationary guideline, it means that you are basically just stuck in one place, and you're bringing all the hair to that. So I could technically take quite large sections because I am pulling it to one place, but I'm going to choose to work quite intricately through here, because if you notice, that's quite a lot of change in head shape as you work through. So I want to be able to control each and every section.
Can you talk about some of the things that are going on through your mind, like, you know, body position, your tension? Because it looks like it's, you know, very easy for you. You know, it's a lot of practice, but, you know, talk about what's going on in your head as you're doing this.
Well, I think you've always got to have that kind of disciplined feeling or approach when you're doing hair. I always find that I have to kind of like get myself in the mood or the zone that I can concentrate. If not, then I'm going to get sloppy and I start to scoop hair. And that's generally what happens when I stop thinking about what I'm doing. But, you know, tension is extremely important. To be honest with you, it's the most important thing I've found over the years, because it's that last thing that you do before you open and close the scissors. It's actually what it determines whether this line that you see is clean or not. So tension, very, very important. Unfortunately, it's not something as a teacher I can actually teach you. Tension is something that you have to do yourself. It's kind of like, the relation to it is like when you finally was able to ride a bike. You know, it's the balance of gravity, basically, I feel. So again, bringing everything down, you can see how low that elevation is, but again, it's not at zero. So when you comb this all the way down, this is the start of it, and that's the graduation that's happening up to this point right here. So now you're starting to see that bevel up quite low. And that's because I kept my elevation low. And that's also what's keeping this line uninterrupted. It's pretty much consistent all the way through. And that's because I kept my elevation lower than the hairline. If I'd have gone above the hairline, then you're going to start to get that break because of what the hairline does.
Is that because of what's
Yeah,
happening?
what's happening here. On her it's not that bad, but you know, on us, we have rescission, so it does happen. So again, all down into that first section. You know, and it's a relatively quick technique, this. Really all it is you managing and being in control over the hair. And as I said before, that's easier said than done.
The thing I like so much about this is your client is seeing exactly where that length is going to sit.
So it's like straight in there. You've not started back here, then moved to this point and not got what you wanted. You've put it in, you've nailed that length in there now, so you can do whatever you want in the back of it. So now that that's done, let's just have a quick cross check, just to see what's happening here. So cross checking the opposite dimension, and really what you're looking at is the elevation. I'm looking at how cleanly and how efficiently and consistently I brought that hair down, and that's going to determine this line through here. You see a little bit there, I wasn't consistent enough. So I'll just check through all of that, and then I'll move on to the other side. Pretty good. And I'm cross-checking at the same kind of place as where it was cut to. Alright, so now let's do the other side. I'll turn it around, it's much easier. You know, and the great thing about this is it doesn't really matter what tool you use. You know, you could do this with a razor, you could do this, you know, with your thinning scissor or whatever. It's the movement in hair cutting doesn't change based on the instrument that you use. It's still the same. It's kind of so. Allowing this natural texture to do what it wants to do, because if you fight it, it doesn't matter what you do this way, it's always going to go back to this. So that's why I established that length in naturally. So I would say we're about the jawline on the other side, right? So the key to this is to start longer. So I'm a little bit heavier on this side. I do sometimes do this, but the majority of the time what I do is I'll actually look at the balance. When you see something, when you see balance, you don't touch the balance, you see the imbalance. Like if you're walking in the grocery store and you see someone's haircut and it's uneven, you see the imbalance, you don't touch and feel it to find that. So I don't always do that because that's not always a true test, because you don't walk around pulling that person's hair down all the time. You've got to allow it to just do what it wants. So use both.
Plus you're stretching it.
Exactly, you're pulling on it. Anytime you touch it, it's not doing what it naturally wants to do, is it?
I find a lot of times in your classes, it's hard for sometimes the students just to let the hair drop and cut it where it lives. We're so conditioned to always place it in our fingers. Yeah, hold it tight. But letting it drop, it really shows the true story, right?
Yeah, very much so. How are we doing, Mark?
All good. Looks good.
Christina says hello.
Hi, Christine. So same thing, going to pull it down to that same elevation. Didn't want to do something that was overly complicated with all these different steps to it. Haircutting shouldn't be difficult. Should be quite easy, and you should be doing it more efficiently. As in more hybrid, you know, knowing when to be gas and when to be electric.
Had to.
No pun intended.
It's better for the environment.
It is. So, and I think, you know, that's kind of how I teach haircuts now, is I don't teach like I used to with all the different bits and bells and whistles, and, you know, that's an inspirational way of doing things. I love that. That's art. But to me, it's about getting through the haircut as quickly and as efficiently without losing the integrity of perfection, because time is money, you know. You should be able to do these precision haircuts relatively quickly and easy. So same exact thing, my body position, I'm just stood directly in front of it. But if you notice, whenever I'm working with graduation, I definitely don't stand with my feet together. I always stand with my feet apart so that I have more leverage of where I can move.
Why do you think mistakes happen within this technique? What's a common thing that happens?
I would say that the biggest kind of mistake with this is because you're starting from the front, it's not as easy to balance the haircut. When you start, let's say you're working a triangular shape, which is lighter in the back, heavier in the front. You start in the centre back, so you have your guide for both sides, it's there. Whereas anytime you hit something round, it's like you're starting here, there's no, I can pull this over here and use it as a clue. So to me, getting the balance in is one of the hardest things. But you know, I don't stress. I know if I'm quite close to the other side, I'm okay with that. I do believe in like the fact that this is a organic material that moves in motion. It isn't a house. It isn't a structure that doesn't move. You know, so there is an element of imperfection in the perfectionism. If you get what I'm saying. It's not an Instagram picture, it lives after that, you know what I mean? So you'll see all the impurities of haircuts, and all haircuts have that. Just some are worse than others, that's all it is.
So for the people that are tuning in, if you have any questions, you know, please fire them off. I'll try.
Yeah, if you're just coming in, what we're doing is just cutting a little kind of box bob shape. I'm putting in the kind of graduated bob kind of feeling, and then my friend Mark here has come all the way from London to the beautiful weather. He's going to cut a little fringe. Mark's the proud owner of Electric, which is what we have at the factory, and it's an amazing product line from England, made in England by English people, which we like. And we went over in March and we did a shoot together on a few models, and it turned out to be really cool, and we've used it. It's being used and it's being put in magazines and stuff, so I thought it would be nice to do something from that today. So now that the front's done, quite happy with that. It's a good length to work from. Now I'm just going to take this into the back, and I'm going to keep it within that kind of heavy lower graduation. Don't need all these clips though. So what I will do is I'll take my first section from the front again, so that I have a guide and I can see what's going on. I'm not just going to leave that and cut whatever in the back and hope that they meet and connect. So I'll take that first section again. Down into.
So I have a question for someone that hasn't been in the hair business for 3 years, so they've taken like a 3-year hiatus, and what would you suggest, to be kind of a refresher on their cutting skills?
What class to take?
Yeah.
I mean, obviously my knowledge historic class would be great. Really all it is it's taking you through all those fundamental shapes that we all cut, but breaking it down and making it easier. So it's a great refresher kind of a situation. Alright, so now taking this into the back. Bring this up a little bit, a bit easier on my back. So here's where we left off. So all I'm going to do now is just continue this all the way, and whatever line I want to see is what I'm going to cut. So it's almost like I'm going to draw this line in, but I'm going to do it with my scissors, and I'm going to do it with that low elevation. I don't really go too far past this knuckle, because if you notice the fingers get wider towards there anyway, so I'll actually cut that kind of a line. If that's what you want, then go past that second knuckle.
When you're working this type of haircut, how concerned are you about the hairline at the nape? Is there like a particular hairline this might not be best for?
Yeah, you've got to really analyze any hairline for anything like this, because it will determine whether that sits in or not. That's going to determine how short you take it or how long you leave it, because you may need the weight to, suppress something that's making the hair do that. So hairlines that grow up, this is not great for. You know what I mean? So you've always got to analyse the terrain before you build anything. Any architect must know the landscape and what's going on.
I think there's also just a bit of honesty that you have to have with your clients. They might come in with a picture that they saw off of Instagram, and you have to let them know what it's going to take to achieve that, what the maintenance is going to be.
So again, it's quite simple. Everything's coming down to that first section. So super low elevation with this. So essentially what you're doing is you're just beveling the bob line, because you're keeping it super low. The higher the elevation, that bevel lifts up. That's that weight line that you create. So it seems like it's easy, but it's actually quite controlled, as far as it's not that easy to do. Because you are pulling so low, it has to be so perfect every time. So the discipline is in the sectioning and staying clean. That's what keeps me sane within a haircut. What keeps me into the haircut is the cleanliness of everything around it. I used to section away everything so you've got everything all done up and that. But I found that just became really time consuming, and I wasn't into that anymore. I'd rather section as I go throughout the haircut. Because, what if you change your mind and you're only 3 sections into a 8-section haircut that you thought out last night? You know what I mean? So sometimes it's not the most efficient thing.
So can you talk about, how important it is that you're walking with, each...
Yeah, if you notice what I'm doing is I'm walking with it, but if you see how I'm pulling the hair down, I'm pulling it exactly where it wants to fall. So I'm not doing this over here. I'm cutting it there where it's actually going to live. Because I'm not going to be here all day to do that. It's going to do that. So I'm making sure that I pull it into where it's going to fall. So
I have a question about paying attention to the root when you hold a section between your fingers. Basically, is it important to?
Yeah, great question. That's kind of like what I was just talking about, is understanding where that's going to fall. And what I relate it to, what I use the analogy, it's like water coming down a waterfall. That's what you want to look at these strands of hair. Because that's essentially where it's going to naturally fall. So that's where you've got to cut it, but with a slight elevation. So, same thing. So you see that right there, I'm going to cut it there. I'm not over here with it. See, that's
Perfect.
what a lot of people tend to do, is they'll do this and it'll come over here and forward. But it doesn't live there, does it? It's going to live here. So you have to look at that and pick it up where it lives, and then put it in. Match your finger angle to the cutting angle that you've got.
What would you say about Instagram and other social media and how it's affected the industry?
Wow, that's a deep question. I think it's absolutely awesome, to be honest with you. It's made our industry more responsive, I feel, to how it used to be. For me, personally, I love it. I mean, when I left corporate hair world, I relied on my following on Instagram to help me grow my business. Online education, private education, all that kind of stuff. So I think it's good personally, and I think it's a good tool for any hairdresser, whether you're trying to build a clientele or whether you're an educator and you're trying to find an audience. There's a lot of people out there in our industry, and there's enough, talent to go around and that to enjoy all of it. But with anything like that, it opens the door for anybody to do anything. That's the nature of what it's created. So credential-wise, you're not seeing as many natural teachers. A lot of people are able to share their knowledge and their experience, whereas that used to be non-existent. You have to climb a ladder to get to that point to be allowed to go on stage and to have a voice and have an opinion. So I find social media, Instagram for hairdressers is really cool. And I think people can decide whether they like it or not. It's not for everybody. For me, it's awesome. And I know it's for you.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's a really fair assessment of it.
It's cool though, it's a challenge, I feel. What do you think, Mark, about the whole social media?
Well, I think, part of the creative process for me is about sharing your message. And I think if you can share it like this with a global audience, when I see how many people are watching this, I think it's amazing. I think America, in some ways, a little bit further ahead than the UK on the social media game. But it means we're all connected and we can all get our messages across. And ultimately, we can all improve our craft.
Perfect.
And I think it's identified elements and facets of our industry that people never knew existed, even hairdressers. Probably lots of people didn't always think, there's the platform world of hair cutting, there's the education side of hair cutting, now you can see everything and you can see what kind of path you want to take in our industry. And it's just like it always was. There's going to be hairdressers and non-hairdressers involved. And you're going to get a lot of people that want to kind of use the hairdresser money. That's how it is. So real heavy low graduation. Obviously when I dry this, then I'll start to work on the outline and stuff like that and that. But really just showing you really low, heavy graduated shape. It's quite reminiscent of a firefly or a wedge. but just not as much elevation in it. It's kept super low around here. So now let's just pop this other side in real quick in the back, and then we can do the bangs or fringe.
When you guys did your shoot in London, you know, what were some of maybe the iconic looks that inspired you to, you know, recreate what you created?
Well, I like the wardrobe kind of gave me that vibe. It was kind of Mark's idea, the whole thing, and it kind of just went on from there.
But it was a true collaboration, because even though the collection is called Neo Mod, and the mod's a reference to the 1960s in the UK, very strong tailored clothes, and we had some pieces, wardrobe pieces from that. We thought we'd build a shoot around that. Obviously, DJ is English, I'm English, and we had a day first that was just a jam. We presented with 3 or 4 haircuts in front of each other and talked through a lot of philosophy. And I think, you know, if hair is done right, it should connect to art, music, fashion. Everything should have a relevance, and those things should be aligned. But it was brilliant. It was a brilliant collaboration. So it's good to be here hearing a bit more today.
Awesome.
So I'm just coming through the exact same way, meeting the other side. So this coming weekend, you're going to be in Las Vegas, Mark, right?
Yeah, we're gonna head over to Cosmoprof in Vegas.
Nahas.
Yeah, have a look at the Nahas. You know, see. I went there last year for the first time, and I think any time a hairdresser is pushing or being pushed to produce the best work, whether that's in front of an audience or whether it's in front of a camera, or even whether it's just describing to your client in the salon what you're doing, I think you're on this continual improvement. You know, you're getting better all the time.
Awesome.
Cool. I'll be in Columbus, Ohio this weekend, teaching at Virtue Salon with Stay Sharp Nation, which is really cool. It's been a year or so since I've been there, so I'm looking forward to going back. And then I have a class coming up here in San Diego on the 12th and 13th of August. There's still a few spaces. As you can see, the factory is not massive. It's a very small education centre. So I keep my classes relatively small. There's 7 stations, so there's 7 places in each class. If you're interested in that, you can follow the link on my profile to sign up. So again, coming through in the back, what I'm doing is I'm taking that section from the front also and incorporating it into the back, combing that hair straight down and using a slight elevation and making my fingers match the angle of the cutting line. So I'm not doing this.
So I noticed on your social media you were talking about how you've been kind of retooling the Knowledge Destroys Fear class and format, and
yeah, just I'm constantly evolving. You know, I think that's what an artist does, but also as a teacher. You know, I've been a teacher my entire career. I was trained to be a teacher from day one. And so my whole career has been trying to make things simpler, to simplify, to not embellish or elaborate too much on things. And I think once you understand hair cutting, which it will happen, you will understand it eventually, and there'll be nothing you don't get about it. It's then trying to take what you know and break it down and get rid of the superfluous. So you know, that's kind of what the class has become. It changes every year or two because certain things I don't need anymore. I've figured out the next thing, you know what I mean? And that's what happens with a lot of teachers and a lot of educators. They'll go through phases, and it's nothing to do with skill level, it's to do with experience and the time you've actually done it. Experimentation. Experimenting is the fanciest word for fucking up, for making mistakes, and that's what haircutting teachers do. We've experimented and played around with techniques. So now I'm at the stage where the class is kind of a lot of different approaches to some of the most fundamental techniques that you're going to use in your everyday salon life. Even for an educator too, it's not just for a stylist, you know, just to see how I've evolved what I know. Alright, so that's the kind of basis of the shape. I'll definitely do all the drying and all that kind of stuff afterwards. But we're going to let Mark come in now because he's actually a hairdresser as well. It's not just a product company on there.
Hairdresser first, product second.
Exactly. And he's a Yorkshireman too, so he's really good at cutting hair. He's the best. So I'm going to pass it over to Mark. We'll do the orbit now, huh?
Well, actually, there's something I thought I'd show you first, you know, because a reference picture is really, really important. Having what is your end point with a haircut? We took our inspiration from this of Natalie Portman when she was in the movie Leon, and you know, I just think if you've got that in your mind and you can share that with your client and share it with your audience, I think that's important. Now, that's the concept. But the reality, this is something I did for a magazine in the UK, was this, you know, and I like to give a haircut a desirability factor, something that's wearable, something that's got a direct link to fashion, so we use that as the concept, and we use that as the finish. And I'm just going to show you how we cut that fringe, a little technique that goes with it.
Looks great.
So, ready, there we are. Okay, so we'll work with same sections we have here. A little bit of prep spray, just allow that hair to move a little bit. We'll take a centre parting, and then when I'm doing this in the salon, it's really important to get around the front of the client. So I'll come around this side, and we'll just take a triangular fringe section. Now it's important that you do this centrally so we've got complete symmetry, and it's also important that we don't bring any unwanted hair from the recession area. So we take all this back off the hair. Thank you, DJ. Clip in.
Sorry if I'm making people dizzy.
No worries. We complete the triangle from this side. Take all this back off the face. And that leaves us with our fringe section. Now, there's two parts to this. First, it's the fine tooth part of the comb, and the precision lines, they're held between the fingers, and they're slightly elevated, because remember, we don't want a blunt line here, so we're slightly elevating. And we're going in with the scissor at 45 degrees, so it's a very controlled point cut. So it's quite a contrast to what DJ was doing. You know, DJ's creating a very, very clean line. And we're creating a strong line, but the elevation mixed with the very controlled point cut just gives us a little bit of naturalness to the finish, if naturalness is a word.
It is.
Is it? Good. Yeah. I'm glad about that.
Because we said so.
There's nothing worse than an English person not speaking English.
Oh.
So a little bit of, we're going in at 45 degrees. I always hate to see people point cutting in an uncontrolled way, really hammering into the hair. So you can see here we've got a strong shape, nice little cutaway at the sides, and once we've got the desired length, I then elevate this so it's almost straight out and repeat the same process.
So you use two different elevations in there.
Yeah, one to decide the length
Right.
and the fall, and the second elevation is so steep it's not going to affect the length.
So
It's just
that's
gonna make-
exactly what I just did, but I cut blunt. So I put in a low elevation first, put the outline in, and then I pulled everything to a little bit higher up. So you're getting rid of that sharp, everything the same weight on the outline,
Yeah.
you're beveling it in.
My belief in cutting hair is everything should have a strong perimeter and everything inside should move in a natural way. And you set it down here, you're not going to over direct the hair, you're going to cut it so it falls exactly where you cut it. Same with the fringe. And I think the other little thing, just, you know, if you're doing this in the salon, share what you're doing with your client, because going back to that thing of every time you present your work, it makes you a better hairdresser. There's nothing like doing a haircut in the salon, telling your client about it, maybe bringing your assistant over and sharing it with them. You know, the more you share, I think the better it, ultimately, the better it makes us. So I just want to blow dry that a little bit. I don't know whether we've got. This is I'll just use this sort of one here. Very, very quick. This will take seconds to blow dry. Medium heat. One of the things, you know, I do a lot of session work, working on shoots. And one of the things I learned years ago is I very rarely use a hairdryer on full heat. You know, I just find it kills the shine of the hair. And same when we're cutting. We don't want to over direct the hair too much. We want it falling as naturally as possible. So when I'm using the airflow to finish it, not too much product, you know, that little bit of prep spray is enough to. Okay, so that is it dry. And what we want to do now is create the texture. So it's the same elevation as before. Obviously dry hair, the difference between dry hair and wet hair is dry hair has no elasticity. So I'm now coming up at 45 degrees and I'm just removing. Same idea as before, I don't want to affect the length, I just want to make this a bit more textured and a little bit more awkward and uneven. So it's a, you know, it is a direct contrast from the precision lines that are in the haircut. And
Looks like it's creating quite a bit of space in between.
Yeah, that's right. But what you have now is, you know, I think the 90s is being huge from the fashion point of view. And just that awkwardness of a fringe that's broken and choppy like that, as opposed to the straight lines that are in the haircut.
What do you think about that kind of thing with the 90s fashion and stuff, like all the old sport labels are coming back? And
Yeah,
like,
well, it's
in Target they've got Umbro now for kids, and you know that's kind of such an iconic British sports brand.
yeah. I think everything needs a cycle, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I think, you know, it's about taking the fundamentals of that era and instilling it in. But I think that little awkward fringe against the precision lines, and you know, the higher I elevate it, the more I can refine it. You know, by refining it, I'm now going straight in rather than cutting 45 degrees.
So you're getting more softness with that. You're taking out less weight.
Talk about how you're using the mirror.
Well, the mirror here is a great finishing tool. You don't often have the luxury of a mirror when you're, you know, on a session or on stage as well. So but in the salon, it's a great thing. You know, I think our little awkward fringe there with a real precision shape. Maybe we should dry it and we'll come back. Maybe we'll take a little break and.
Yeah, let's do that. So I'll go ahead and I'll blow dry it, refine a little bit of it, and then we'll bring you guys back in again. So stay tuned on my Insta. We'll see you in a bit. Thanks a lot.
Cool.